And I got the light on, so there they are. Two of them sticking out as far as they friggin' can be without falling out. God, they didn't fall out. All right, Leo, so I'm going to show you this because you said to me, which I really appreciate, that I should figure out something reasonable. So here's the deal. These, as you know, are cam actuators. I am getting a code on this back head that is saying I have a cam bank 1 over retarded, and it will not clear. So the question is it that cam actuator is truly not working? Or perhaps this cam actuator solenoid, which goes on right there, which feeds oil through this device right here, is not working? Or is it the fact that those two bolts that were not screwed in right there to the top of the head were letting oil pressure not build up in the head, which this thing uses through that little, I can't point out, but that little O-ring there goes into a part in the head, which is right there. So the question is, did those two bolts that came out, which are right above that hole, so there's the hole that goes into that VCT assembly, there's the plug that was not turned in. So was oil leaking past that plug so that enough pressure wasn't building up in this hole as that hole fed, you can see where this goes, as that hole fed that O-ring right there, which allowed oil to come up through to the actuator, which sits right there, which pushes the oil through that hole right there, which drives the oil into the front of the actuator, which causes the actuator to work. So, is the fact that all of this was throwing a code and the car had no power between 2,500 and 4,000 RPM because of that plug? Or is it because of the actuator assembly? I had no code on this engine with that actuator assembly beforehand. I now have a code with that actuator. So after taking all this apart and tightening that back up, do I put this engine all back together and find out that I, in fact, have a problem with that actuator or a problem with this actuator solenoid? Or do I replace all of that for, I believe, somewhere close to $700 and then put it back together? So I'm not looking to do this again. So I'm actually going to replace that actuator. I'm going to replace that solenoid. And I'm going to replace that device right there so I can make sure that when I put this fucking thing back together, bank 1, cylinder 1, bank 1, is no longer in a retarded position for a code. I don't know. That's what I'm going to do. So I guess fairness, you know, it's either do that or possibly have to tear this engine apart and then redo it, but I could put it together and it could be nothing, but then I may have to tear it apart for a third time. I'm going to replace it. So I think, you know, I don't know what's causing the problem. It may not be the problem that was caused or by those things not being screwed in all the way, or maybe a problem caused by those things screwed in all the way. My gut tells me it is a code caused by those things not being screwed in all the way because of the proximity of that plug to that hole, which feeds the whole thing. But I'm not going to put this thing together with the risk that it continues to throw the code and then I got to take it apart all over again. So fairness would be for me to give you the receipts for all that stuff and reimburse me. So that's, I think that's about as fair as I can be. I wouldn't be I'm not making any profit on this. I'm just basically trying to get the darn car back together, and I probably wouldn't have had this code without those things, but like I said, so it would be reimbursing me for something that I've got to spend anyways. So, there you have it. Those are my thoughts.